Welcome to the Empowered Team podcast. I'm your host, Kari Schneider, and we are here today with the one and only, the amazing Jason Shipley. And Jason is an American entrepreneur, an engineer, and an investor. Specifically, he's the founder of a company called Midwest Custom Engineering. And this is a US-based company, but it's focused more on not just engineering, but engineering things that are really functional for use in the world, not just on paper, but stuff that's going to make a difference for feed, food, housing, all sorts of things. He's a real visionary kind of person, visionary kind of entrepreneur. Not only that, I cannot skip over this at all because this will be a real heart one, a heart pull. And that's that you have overcome serious loss. And at the same time, you've been so purposeful and driven and drawing awareness to the subject of your loss, and at the same time being inspirational with running a 5K every day. And I think as of today, you've run 1,068 5Ks in a row. I want to emphasize that, in a row. And everyone who's listening, I'm not doing this person's biography any justice. So Jason, tell us a little more first how you got into a pull towards real functional, purposeful engineering and the visions that you have for us. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think, thanks for having me on the podcast. First of all, it's going to be a pleasure, I'm sure, to explore this together. But realistically, I've always had a drive. I actually named my investment company Driven Investments because I always was driven to succeed. And I've always just had these visions of, just crazy ideas and how I can bring them to life. And I started out in the equipment business and I started out in the used equipment business in 2012. And I started just finding new and better ways of doing things. And I would say, like, man, how could I take this piece of equipment that somebody else has been doing, since the 60s, and how can we bring that into the current world, right? And I would start to find new and better ways of doing things, and then solving problems, basically. Like, here's what I have, here's what I want. How do we design and build everything in between to make that a reality? And so that's what we do today. We basically custom design solutions, and we do focus mostly on animal feed. I would say that's probably 50% of our business. And then pet food is big, maybe 25%. And then is kind of a similar processing for, somebody's dehydrating blueberries, or who knows what they're doing. Like, it could be any type of process, whether it's food or an animal feed ingredient or pet food. They all have very high standards in America anyway. And so similar equipment is used in all those industries. And then we also do things in biomass and recycling. So we've pioneered some biochar systems where we actually convert anything that has carbon in it, which is just about everything, back into carbon. And we use that basically a pyrolysis process where you have the absence of oxygen. And we just turn things back into carbon with heat and time. So, there's a lot of we're now developing new water technologies. We are developing a lot of different things, and we actually launched our own TV show too. So it's been a very fun adventure, and a lot of personal growth has had to happen to make that all a reality.
Okay, this is really neat. Now, I could geek out on things. I'm a super curious person, which is good for a podcast here. But there's some things you're speaking to. One, I'm hearing that I think is so neat is that you're not just looking to improve something, you're looking to take something and also be aware of where that particular usage could potentially be used somewhere else. Because there's similar needs in perhaps a similar industry that's different. And sometimes that's missed. So it's really neat that you're looking at those things, but also not just one area. You've got, I happen to live in Canada in an area that's very agricultural based. I have a friend, you might like this, maybe we'll introduce you to each other, a friend who has dairy farms, but they take all of the waste and have a huge methane production that heats their home, that they can sell that methane. Really neat things. And then there's also all the feed for the dairy cows, the organic operation. They've got another operation. So really neat things when I think of just this tiny smidge of what I'm familiar with to what you're producing and thinking of that's on this grander scale that's going to actually have impact on life, on humanity, on how we do things and making it more effective and more efficient. So that's kind of I'm iterating back my absorption of what you've said, which isn't as technical, of course, but I really think it's incredible how you're doing all of these things. If you go ahead.
No, I mean, that's exactly why I launched my TV show, right? Like, so people like my best friends didn't even know what I did. Like, I would sit there and explain it and then be like, I just got to show you. So I probably launched our show because it really is explaining, American manufacturing and then how that manufacturing applies to, we're starting with the farm to table story, essentially, of how we actually are bringing every component all the way through so that you get the best, highest quality and lowest cost, meat, milk, eggs, whatever it is, produce at the grocery store, and how that is, how those factors come into play. And so we chose American manufacturing because we're an American based manufacturer, but eventually we're going to be showcasing exporting and how we're actually doing that. Because we've had people from the UK who use our equipment, people in Canada that use our equipment, and they're like, why don't you come feature us? And I was like, maybe, we'll see.
That
We're still, we'll end up there.
I love that idea with the television show because it's like pulling the curtain back, and you think of how many kids or how many people just have no idea how something comes to be where it is in the store, whether it's Costco or the grocery store or whatever it is. How did my food get here? How did this get here? And when you pull that curtain back, you're like, this piece of equipment makes this possible. None of this could have happened. And and just to share this in a different context, I live in an area that has a strong Mennonite community as well. And
Yeah.
there's some old tradition Mennonites who still farm the land with horse and plow.
Yeah.
And you look at living in an area like this, you are next to a huge metropolis, Toronto, and then at the same time an agricultural area that has everything from horse and plow to the most advanced farming equipment. So
Yeah.
it's neat that you could take a television show and illustrate that to people who couldn't necessarily understand what's going on. And when your closest friends don't fully understand what's going on, you know that, okay, people probably need to know in some capacity, and it might help them in their understanding, their interaction with the world. So that's pretty powerful.
And when people come to work for us, they're like, wow, I have a whole lot more respect for how our food is made because they don't fully understand how many details go into the process and everything. The beauty is because of the engineering mindset in our world, that everything is always continuous process of improvement, right?
That's
Everything is honed down to be efficient and effective. And
Yep.
at least in America, I believe we have the most efficient, like we were plowing down farmland, actually mowing down farmland to build up houses, right? And yet, with less acres, we're able to not only feed more people, we're actually able to export food. 100 years ago, we were a very, agronomy driven society, and it was not near where it is today. So the technology has made a world of difference, and farming is extremely high tech today, and people don't even realize that.
Wow. I've worked with or met a lot of engineers, and they tend to be very linearly micro focused in a lot of ways. I don't mean to generalize here, but you're talking about a lot of things that clearly light you up. So, what lights you up the most out of what you've either been learning lately or developing lately? What really lights you up lately?
Even though I'm in the engineering field, I actually get lit up probably more by personal development and, growing a team. I feel very blessed to have assembled the team that I have. We've grown, let's see, we've grown about 7x this year, and so as far as human resources, and now we have an extremely good team, but that eats up your profitability too. So the game of business is kind of a fun game to play, but it's also the real battlefield where you have to actually like understand personalities and how they all mesh together. That reveals your level of leadership very quickly. And you start to say, like, I have the law of the lid, I must become even better. And so now I'm relinquishing control of certain areas like revenue generation has always been my thing. Now I'm relinquishing control of revenue generation. And that's a hard move for me, right? I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just going to trust my team. I know they are capable. I've hired the best people in the world and they're going to go do it. And it's fine. But then it's also, having systems and creating, SOPs for everything and actually systematizing your business and at the same time creating a culture that wins and they're making sure that that culture is conveyed throughout and understanding that that's my most important job is making
Yeah.
sure that the culture is phenomenal. And then the culture builds the business. I don't have to build the business. So yeah. So I think my biggest passion is really just the game, right? It's the game of life where you're playing the game of business, but it's the game of life. And it's a never ending game. There's limitless levels, right? And so the beauty of that is that like last night I went to a Miami Heat versus the Bulls game and I got box seats and I took, 5 of my friends, I took my videographer and it was like this is incredible. Like, I have an incredible life. And I
Yeah.
just was thinking like, man, there's a whole nother level. I didn't even know this
Yeah.
existed. Like, why am I not doing this? So there's always another level. And it's a beautiful gift to just like start experiencing life because, you know, after experiencing tragedy in my life, I started to become hyper aware and hyper focused on the little details, right? You become aware of how green the grass is, how the sunshine feels on your face, how the wind is blowing in your hair, and you're like, "Wow, that's great." It was always there. I just didn't notice it. I wasn't paying attention. So,
Okay. Okay. So I want to make sure that what you've just said isn't missed because we're definitely going to dive into what you've experienced in your life. But I'm just moved. I love this podcast is self-mastery for leaders. And when it comes to business culture, when it comes to the game that you talk about playing,
yeah.
there's this inner game in our mind and our hearts. There's this interactive game with the other people, and then there's this action game that we're actually physically playing, right? And what you've spoken to, just how it's this game of business that involves growing other people and growing as an individual and as a leader. It's that game that's lighting you up the most, even though you're just so intrigued and driven by all these amazing things that you're doing at the same time. So it's really, I love the vulnerability and sharing that. And for other leaders to hear this that are sometimes, as most entrepreneurs have been, where they're so driven by the outcome that they're going for or the revenue, as you said, that they're not seeing that the process of growing themselves and building the business and the other humans that they're growing and interacting with, it's all of it. It's not that one outcome. It's not that direction or that path. It's the whole thing coming together. So I love how you've really pointed to that that game of business and how you're playing it, the culture that really drives the business because it's something that's so much larger than you. That if that thing is operating and healthy and amazing, then that's going to keep your business flourishing as well. And it sounds to me like there's some personal things, a personal tragedy that might have influenced how you've re-established how you do business and how you interact with and how you release or relinquish control over certain things in your business because you realize that you're meant for something more. Um, Tell us about that tragedy that has really grown you and maybe deconstructed and rebuilt you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so to pre-frame that, recently I had a friend, actually when I was in India, and her grandfather passed away. And she said, "This is my first funeral I've been to." And I thought, "You're 38 years old and this is your first funeral." I said, "Wow, you are blessed. You are very blessed." Because I've had a series of tragedies from the time I was young. My first, my brother passed away when I was 5, and then, had aunts and uncles and my grandparents, the whole series, and then, my other brother passed away when I was 34, in 2017, he passed away, and then my dad passed away in 2020. I had all these series, and I started developing, like, this resiliency, like, "All right, I'm, of course, the guy that's gonna deliver the eulogy at my brother's funeral, at my dad's funeral. Like, I'm just the one who's doing this." But, then in May of 2024 was by far the worst day of my life because, unfortunately, my daughter ended up drowning, and it was just 20 seconds of not paying attention, and, you know, those moments are so precious, and you do not know. until you've been through something like that. And I wish that on absolutely no one. But losing my daughter, she was the light of my world, and she always will be. And you love all your kids, but there's some kids that are just like, wow, like that we just have a special connection, right? And losing her was very, very hard on me. And I went through all the emotions, the full range, of the guilt and the fear and the pain and the sorrow and the heartbreak. But I had a coach that helped me, and I started finding baby empowering meanings on my own. Thankfully, I've been through Tony Robbins, and I had done positive anchoring. And I'm so grateful for that because I was able to understand how to collapse an anchor, how to set, I learned all these techniques, to help reset my state and to control my state. And I was already running a 5K at that point, right? I committed actually with another plat, Adam Chaplin. I said, "Hey, I'll run a 5K for 365 days with you." And we'll talk about that later. But, next day, it was almost like a dream. I woke up and I was like, this didn't really happen. There's no way. This didn't really happen. And I had a choice to make. And I almost quit on myself. Like I almost quit. I'm like, man, nobody would blame me. I could quit and nobody would blame me. But I would have to look at myself in the mirror and I'd know I quit on myself. And so I decided like, I got to go on a run. I got to let this out of my body. I have to. And, it was like one of those things where you lace your shoes up and you go on a run and, I run out of the neighborhood and the news is sitting there covering. And I'm like, oh, like another hit, and then it's just like one thing after another. But on that run, there was a little blue jay that followed me all the way. And it was like that little sign, that little sign of hope. We were like, huh, maybe she's okay, you know? And you hold on to those little bitty moments and you say, okay, that's good. I found a piece of good. And then you replace it with a baby empowering moment. And you find another baby empowering moment and another one and another one. And you find a better and better one. And you just keep replacing it. And then I had a coach that told me, Jason, maybe I'm crazy, but I believe that when Zaya came down, she talked to God and said, hey, here's what I want to accomplish in this lifetime. And he said, that's beautiful. That's only going to take you 3.5 years. But guess what? I have this guy over here, Jason, and he needs to learn these other lessons. You guys are going to be beautiful together. I thought, huh, I love that meeting. That's a good meeting. So I'm going to hold on to that one. And so I believe there's a purpose in everything that happens in your life. And it's hard. I never did pray for an easy life. I prayed that I would become better and be able to overcome things. And sometimes you don't know what you ask for, right? Because I've had some pretty hard moments in my life. And I tell people like I live on an accelerated time frame. If you don't talk to me for a year, it's like you haven't talked to me in a decade because every month is like another year for some other people. I live on this just super fast pace and I love that. But it's also a lot for a lot of people. And I find other business leaders a lot of times are living on that accelerated time frame. And it's really easy to leave people behind. And you have to stop and give them space to grow at their own pace because not everybody's living at your pace, you know? So having grace and giving that opportunity, especially with my children, with my other children, I was very grateful that I met Master Co through Tony as well. And spirituality became an extremely important part of my life. It kind of knocked me on that spiritual path. Like before it would have been like, oh, that's nice. Like I should do that. I should do that someday. Like I'll do that later. And then
Energetic healing, you name it. Yeah.
and so immediately it became a must. It was like, and so I texted Master Co. He's like, "You should come to Healer's Mastery." I came to Healer's Mastery. The main thing I learned was pranic psychotherapy, like pranic healing. Pranic psychotherapy was phenomenal, and not just for me, but for my children to be able to help them remove the negative thought forms. You still have memories, but it removes some of that grief, some of that pain, and that debilitating emotion. Because you have energetically you have blockages and you have things that are stuck in your astral body that you just can't get rid of unless you learn techniques. And it's just energy, right? Like everything is energy. And he explained it in such a scientific method. I'm like,
My,
spiritually, that's scientific. I can get around this. Right. And I
uh,
understood because the engineer mind in me was like, ah, okay. He was an engineer too.
thank you.
Exactly. So it was a beautiful gift. It really was. And helped me turn that tragedy into purpose. And I was able to, thankfully, Live Like Jake Foundation was there for me right after. And I had a group of friends. I had a friend group that was absolutely incredible. Not only the Platt community, really, like they surrounded me with so much love and appreciation and joy that I felt so supported. And at the same time, I had, a few local friends and business partners that were just so instrumental in showing love. Like I think you have an idea of love and then you experience love. And there's a difference. There's a big difference. And you really do find out who your true friends are when you have a loss, when you have a tragedy. People who, you know, literally flew across the country to be here. Like, wow. Like you just dropped everything and came across the country. That's a real friend. That's phenomenal, you know? And I'm so grateful that I have those people in my life. Like that's who I want to be. Right. So I surround myself with people that I want to emulate, that I want to live like that. That's the type of life I want to live. And I think that's a very important distinction is that most people, they talk a lot. We all listen to the noise. But when you stop and you think, you know, who in my life is really at that level? And who would I show up for at that level? That's where it's really it hits home. So
What you've shared is so mm, it's tragic and powerful and moving, and there's a few things I want to make sure I circle back to so that they don't get lost because there's so much there. Um, some of the ways that you supported yourself, some of the ways that you received support, because in for someone who's driven like you and entrepreneurial like you, most of us tend to just be driving, going, and we're not, because we're so focused on the thing, we're not the people who are going to think that something's going to happen to us that's tragic. We just kind of we're even grateful for everything we have. We're doing the thing. But it's in those moments that you just described where you didn't know what love felt like until you needed the support in the way that you needed it. And you don't know necessarily how you're going to show up for someone else who might need it because you don't quite know these things of your own capacity or your own need. We're almost blind to them. So you're speaking about people like Adam Jablin. I know who he is, and he's had some struggles, and he's that guy that's going to show up for people. The Live Like Jake Foundation, then suddenly you realize there's not just, I'm not alone in experiencing this horrible loss. There's other people who can help me because they've been through it. You're talking about Master Co, who is an engineer as well, who, like, there's someone who gets how I think and yet has a breadth and depth of knowledge of spirituality and energetic work. And now I get it and can be in that realm too of being logistical and creative and entrepreneurial and business-like and spiritual at the same time. And so many people think it's one or the other. And the tragedy, it sounds like, has allowed you to find so much more in all of these realms that perhaps you may not have, or it would have been different. And you're pointing to this thing that this is, you have a greater understanding of the type of life that you want to live. And you've also pointed to how fast you move, and that sometimes people or things get left behind. You're like you're not living in dog years, you're living in like, super years. So my question is how, and you're also speaking to the purpose being in everything that happens, and finding the purpose and finding those baby lessons that are coming, those purposeful things that are coming from your daughter's death, which I'm a mother, and so I had to hold it in to keep from sobbing here, so that was not an easy thing. Um, but uh, in these, the question is how, when you're that driven and that fast, how do you slow to make sure that you're not leaving people in the dust when you want to be the person that lives that life that can show up for other people, but you also realize that I live a fast life and I'm purposeful and I have these outcomes and I do leave people behind sometimes. So what does it look like to do the thing where you're slowing and you're stopping and yet going fast? And I say that because people who are leaders, people who are entrepreneurs, the people who listen to this podcast are high achievers. And that's this crux of what does that really look like? So in your experience, in your opinion, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I would say, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? Like that is the key. And realistically, taking time to put in your calendar, it's Tony Robbins RPM. Like
Mhm.
I actually sit down with my assistant on Sunday nights and we RPM my entire week. And that is a game changer, right? So I actually put in time. I'm going to meditate at this time. I'm going to journal. I'm going to read. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing the things that keep me high performing, that keep me focused on the things that I need to do, right? I also schedule spending time with my kids. And people may think that's crazy. Okay. Like, well, you should just be spending time with your kids, but it's prioritized for me, right? If I don't prioritize my children, I think it's almost cruel to not schedule time, right? Like I have to schedule time because then guess what? I put my phone on silent mode. I'm not available unless it's an emergency, it'll ring through, but, I'm not available except for spending time with them, and that has been such a game changer in understanding their needs, asking questions, so there are certain people that, they're adjacent to your life, right? And then there's other people who are critical to your life, like your children are critical in your life, like that is not a relationship you can just move past. So those are ones that you have to slow down, maybe, or encourage them. But your children will be your greatest teachers, is my opinion. I mean, God blesses us with unique children that sometimes test our boundaries and put things in a perspective where you're like, woo, you know. However, that's a blessing, and that allows us to say, what about this is like me? When I see a trait or I see a characteristic, I'm like, what about that is like me? Like I'm like that, or I'm drawing that out in them. Because when a relationship is a way of relating. You are relating and you're creating a boomerang without even seeing it, right? Like you're throwing out something and it's coming back and hitting you. Well, that's feedback you have to listen to. And like I learned this actually from the dating world, right? Like, we haven't talked about with their divorce and all that too, but you know, communication is so important and having a feedback loop of like, here's what I said, but what did you hear?
Mhm.
People hear what they want to hear. And in business or in any type of relationship with your children, like creating these feedback loops, I'm making that part of our culture because if it festers and it grows, it's very painful. But if it's part of the culture, you're like, hey, it's time for feedback. That's the time, like, I actually asked my team, I'm like, "I want you guys to all give me feedback." And it was like, "Okay, I don't
Oh,
so I saw a pattern. after the third person said it, I'm like, okay, this isn't just one person's opinion. This is a
Yeah.
third person that said this.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you go a million miles an hour, but you need to slow down and tell us more at the beginning, and then you can delegate the project to us and we'll take care of it. I'm like, wow, that's so much easier. Why didn't I do that?
Right.
And I'm like, why didn't you just say so? Right. So I'm like,
Again, I have those minds around me for a reason.
was like all of a sudden that's where I was like, this isn't my problem. This is our problem. And
Yeah.
we're going to solve this, right? So me to us. And now we are building team camaraderie because it's like, let's put all our minds together and let's just solve this thing and let's knock it out of the park. And so I think that revolutionized my thought process on that. And it's really changed how I interacted like with my children. So asking them, how Tristan, how would you feel loved today? And he's like, I just want you to watch my show with me. Well, I'm not a TV watcher. So for me, I never even thought of that. Like, that didn't cross my mind. So I literally just sat there and watched his show with him for 20 minutes and I blocked out an hour. And 20 minutes later, he gets up. I was like, oh, are we not watching the show? He's like, no, I'm good. Thank you. And I'm like, that's all you needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Like, that's what you needed though. So just asking, what do you need?
Yeah.
And actually listening, right? Like, cause a lot of times, especially as leaders, we have a way of like, this is how we're doing it. And, we make the final call, but a lot of times we may not be the best listeners.
Yeah.
It's,
I love what you've shared here, because for so many people in leadership roles, the emotional intelligence side of things or the relating side of things hasn't been the forte in however or whatever they were going for. And yet, in order for it to be sustainable, in order for it to keep growing, it's so imperative for that to happen, whether it's a family unit, whether it's a business unit. And what you're describing that I really want the listeners to focus in on is, the feedback. Or even before that, you pointed to, I see that characteristic in someone else. You may not like it, but then you're kind of like, oh, there's some of that in me. If we really stop, there's usually anything we don't like anywhere. It's in us somewhere or another. If we can pause and get honest with ourselves and get authentic with the situation. And then you're pointing to also people, whether it's loving a family member or whether it's interacting in a business scenario, you're looking at that going, well, how do I interact with them? It's typically how I want to interact and me and what I'm looking for in the company or what I want the employees to do versus, and that ends up being ridiculous for outcomes because you're looking at two parties. And if those other parties want to have success, then you have to know what makes them go, what lights their fire, what makes them tick. And if we don't ask that question, what's your best scenario for this project? How do you like to be loved, child, partner, spouse, whatever it is? If we don't understand that, then we're going along this bubble of it's a fantasy, it's an illusion, because we're seeing only through our own lens and not bothering to take a look at what someone else's viewpoint is or their perspective is. So I wanted to reiterate in my words what you said, simply so that it really lands for the listener, in that most business people, driven people, high achievers, these are all the people who would listen to this podcast. Sometimes those things get lost because they are too fast, or there is so much going on or so much being absorbed. So your line flow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I say a different line. I say a line that says slow down to speed up. Slow down to speed up.
yeah, I can't remember who it was. I think it was in Fiji. Gene Close was like, if you want to go fast, or no, if you want to go far, you have to go together. If you want to go fast, you can go by yourself, but if you want to go far, you have to go together. So along those same lines, I teach everybody, if you just slow down for a moment, like everybody's in such a fast pace in today's world. Let's just stop. Let's breathe. It's going to be fine. We're going to figure this out. Whatever the problem is, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, you can give me any problem. We're going to solve it. It's okay. Just be calm, take a breath and think. Like, everybody stop doing what you're doing. It's right at the top of the page. What's the problem? Is this really the problem? Maybe
Yeah.
it's not even the real problem. The problem behind it. Just if people would just stop and think for a moment, they can get so much more done. Because now, there's being efficient, which is doing things right. There's being effective, which is doing the right things. We must be doing the right things, because if you do the one thing, because even Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, if you do the one thing that basically, if you do this one thing well, everything else becomes irrelevant, because I did this and it knocked the ball so far out of the park.
Yeah.
I'm already 80% of the way to my goal with one thing. We were looking at a deal the other day, and it was like, we have a target for 100 million in revenue in the next 3 years. We'd be scaling up to that. And I'm like, okay, this is going to take a little bit of work, but we're going to get there. It's fine. And then somebody's like, well, what if we just did $100 million deal like today? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, that sounds great.
Perfect. We don't have to scale.
Well, why don't we just do that? Yeah, that sounds way better. Like, I'm like, yeah, I don't have to struggle. Like,
that
I was like, okay, like, thanks God. That's a great idea. So there's a lot of other options, right? You don't have to wait. If you have the capacity to do something, then do it.
Yeah.
Right. And just stopping to think of, how can I, maybe I'm asking the wrong question. How can I do these things? And if I ask a better question, I'm going to get a better answer. So that's a big key differentiator, is stopping to think.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that, I'll say the one too many. Our brain likes to do 1, 2. These are our options. No, there's 1,000. There's 100,000 options. It's just that we've only narrowed it down to being these 2. And it's not polarizing. There aren't 2. There are so many. All we need to ask is, what would be a little bit of a better option than this one? That's all. Just one other option. Or what would be a little. So it's really powerful that you share that. I'm curious. There's a couple more areas that I'm curious about before we finish, and it's that one has to do with your daily practice of running, but the first one has to do with your practice with family. You've already described of scheduling your time with your kids. This is something that with my clients, it annoys them to no end, where I'm hounding them to go, okay, show me your schedule. Tell me what that looks like, because the things you say you want aren't reflected in your schedule. And you're talking about scheduling time with your child. This is an area, family, marriages, business, people struggle. This is a hard dynamic to keep this working with. How am I a spouse in the environment that I'm growing fast? How am I a father or a mother or a family member in this environment that I'm trying to grow so fast? What would be a couple of maybe something you've overcome, maybe a word of advice or wisdom that you've learned the easy way or the hard way? What would you say around those contexts?
Yeah. So I think starting with why, why is that important to you? For me, like, is it important to be a good husband? Okay. If it is, why? Why is it important? You're like, so I can, and there's a plethora of answers. There's no wrong answer, right? But if it's important to you, document why that's important to you. Figure out, okay, if this is a strong enough drive, it's going to pull me, not going to push me. It's going to pull me into being this better version of myself. And sometimes you have certain people in your life that draw you to a higher level. And I would highly recommend surrounding yourself with those people. That, to me, has been kind of a secret weapon for me, is like, I have to decide what's important for me in my life right now. Why is it important to me? And then find resources, environments, people that support that. And I say, sometimes that does mean letting go of people don't with that.
Yeah.
Because they're familiar doesn't mean they're good, right?
And it doesn't mean they're a bad person or anything.
It's just not
Just not
aligned
the
with who
right
you're doing.
fit.
Yeah. So, and they may just change to a different level of friendship or a different level of association. You're like, we're not every day hangout buddies. We're once a week, or maybe it goes to once a month or whatever. But if they're do need to challenge them to grow and be like, hey man, here's where I'm going. I would love for you to join me. Like, let's do this together. But you still ultimately can't make their decision for them. You can't make their choices. So I've noticed that a lot. I have like some buddies I play golf with once a quarter. Like, I see you, we play golf, we're done. Like, it's great. I still want to check in with you. I still love you. I appreciate you. I hope you're doing fantastic, but you're in the same place you were a decade ago, and I'm not. And so those are, different levels of friendship, right? You're almost in a mentoring role at that point, though. So
Yeah.
you're trying to give them the hand up, and they're looking at you thinking, man, I wish I had done that a lot of
Mhm.
times.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there saying, you can do it anytime, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
sure.
And that's the disconnect sometimes. And what you're describing too is that thing that's greater than one individual, which is the culture of people you surround yourself with. And for our listeners, you've described, and I've mentioned as well, you've described coaching, you've described the Tony Robbins world, you've described friends, you've described the culture in your business, all of these things. It's not one thing, it's all of these things that create the culture of your world that is allowing you when you're low or you've struggled or there's something that's pulled you back, there's that bigger thing than you that's in your immediate circle that's going to help keep you upright or protected or held space for.
I think it's important to curate your world. Okay, so
Mhm.
when I say that, what I mean,
Intentionally.
yeah, so what I mean is with people, with experiences, with events, like, I think honestly, people miss out on this so much. But like, you have the choice of the paint colors in your house. You have the choice of buying yourself fresh flowers today. Okay. You have the choice to create a beautiful environment, to keep your car clean, to keep your closet clean. It may take you an extra 10 minutes, whatever. I don't know what it is, but if you take the moment to say, my environment is mine,
Yeah.
I made it this way because I get to choose intentionally the energy I want to put in, and that's going to reflect in the work I put out.
Yeah.
Right. So those are, I think those are the choices of people, especially when it comes to events with friends. You can go first class and it doesn't cost that much more a lot of times.
Yeah.
You know, there's a million ways to do life. So you may as well do life to the fullest, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think allowing yourself the grace to make mistakes and allowing yourself the grace to say, how can I show up authentically? Because, and if the people leave my life when I showed up authentically, they were never my people anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So learning to disconnect from the outcome a little bit and just say, like, I'm finding my tribe constantly. And it may be changing because
Yeah.
especially as you're growing, that tribe can change. Like, those people may circulate in and out, but ultimately that gets, that position gets filled no matter
Yeah.
what. Right. And so creating the vacuum was the hardest part for me for a long time, right? Like, letting go of the familiar. That was very difficult for me.
And yet here you are, and on that point, there's one more thing I want you to share with people. Um, you're 1,068 5Ks each day. That's significant. I come from a background in high performance sport, and I know a little. I actually know a lot about these things. Give listeners a bit of a a nugget that can help them with that level of consistency. Maybe it's not a 5K, maybe it's something, whatever is relevant in their world, but that level of consistency is challenging for many people in this day and age. One little nugget that you would advise or that was helpful for you for consistency.
Yeah, I would say that at the beginning, it's just a decision, right? Like, at the beginning, it's just pure willpower. For the first 65, 90 days, maybe even 120 days. It's just like, no matter what, because I was in Kansas at the time and there'd be blizzards and there'd be, you're like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not running outside in this, because it was tough, right?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. And so I'm like, all right, like, I'm just going to do it anyway. It doesn't matter what. Like, I just made a decision of it doesn't matter what it is. So I've ran in hurricanes. I've ran, in torrential downpours. I've ran in other continents. I've ran
Bring it. Bring
all
it.
over, right? Like, you say, well, whatever it is, it is. And you just, you get used to saying, like, I'm just going to do it no matter what. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
And it teaches you to, like, just show up for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not a matter of, yeah, I mean, a 5K is one thing you could do, but, you know, it doesn't matter what it is. You need to show up for yourself every day.
Mhm.
And whatever that is in their, in their world, whoever this listener is, like, ask yourself, am I worth it?
Mhm.
Am I worth it? I think just say, yeah. I think
Mhm.
say, yes, I am. And once you decide you're worth it, don't quit. Don't quit on yourself. Just decide, like, I am going to show up for myself in whatever way. And it doesn't matter what happens in the world around me. Every day, I'm going to show up and commit to me.
Mhm. I made that decision for me and my future self, and now I shall obey,
Hmm. Yeah.
basically. I this has been just incredible. If you were, I'm gonna point to where people can get in touch with you, as well as a last question that is, if you were to give yourself a piece of advice, but this is yourself from the past, so this is your now you that's giving a piece of advice to, maybe it's 2 years ago, maybe it's 10 years ago or 20 years ago. What piece of advice would the now you give your past self?
I would probably give myself a little more grace because I always thought I had to do it now, right? And it's like if you just keep plodding along, you will win. You will win and it's going to be okay. But I also would say you don't have forever, right? Like so many times I've seen people let opportunities pass them by or situations pass them by and that's where you have regret. Right? I've never regretted the things that I did. I've regretted the things I didn't do. I mean, whether it was, asking the girl out, or maybe it's making the commitment, or maybe it's building the business, or, like get your pilot license or go race a car. Or if you want to go back to school, just go back to school. Go be a doctor, go be an attorney, whatever you want to do. Like if you want to
Yeah.
be a race car driver, go be a race car driver. Like whatever it is, just start doing it. And you'd be really surprised if you just take one step every single day, little bitty, 1% better every single day. You're going to be 365% better, be three and a half times better every year.
Yeah.
You do that long term, there's going to be very few people they can't even touch you.
Mhm.
So that'd be my advice.
That is powerful. This is so, so good. For people to reach you on Instagram, it's jason.shipley, Shipley 83. That's the Instagram handle. You're at solo.to/MCE. That we'll put a link in the show notes as well so that people can find it quickly. And I would say to people as well, follow you on Instagram, because you've got these, when you do your 5K run, you typically put a thought of the day in there. And when you put the thought of the day in there, it's something that's inspirational, just like the things you shared today. And it can be that little thing that if somebody's looking for consistency, whether it's in their business, their life, their health, you're putting that in there. So by all means, follow and see what you have to share. I think it's amazing. And thank you. Thank you for being with our podcast. This has been fabulous.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I loved it. Thank you.